Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofermento, and today's guest gets me so excited because I feel like this is someone who in so many ways encapsulates everything that the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast stands for. Why do I say that? Because it is so clear to me that this guy loves growing businesses and loves the positive impact that businesses can have on our lives as entrepreneurs, but also our customers and clients' lives. He has a really rooted and grounded approach to growing businesses in a way that makes the world a better place. So let me tell you about today's guest. His name is Garrett Foster. Garrett is an entrepreneur that loves to see businesses grow and scale. He helped his dad and cousin grow their family business to over, are you ready for this big number? $100 million. After that, he started growing his own businesses. 4 bakeries, a real estate portfolio, property management, and construction companies are the businesses that he's owned and grown. He got his business degree from BYU, Idaho, and his master's degree from Gonzaga. When his dad and cousin sold their companies they worked for, he bought them out, which is a really cool transition. I'm so excited to hear all these different industries, business types, business models that Garrett has worked within. He spent several years as an internal consultant traveling to their businesses all over the United States, where in that role, he would assess businesses, identify opportunities, build it back with an operating system. You're going to hear that word quite a bit in today's conversation, systems for success, and help them scale for a few years. As he's owned his own businesses, he's refined the process and systems to work with small businesses in any industry, which means we've all got a lot to learn from Garrett here today. So I'm not going to say anything else. Let's dive straight into my interview with Garrett Foster. All right, Garrett, I'm so excited that you're here with us today. First things first, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Heck yes, you've got a lot to live up to today, Garrett. You've got an awesome background, a very diverse set of business experiences. So why don't you take us beyond the bio to kick things off? Who's Garrett? How'd you start doing all these cool things?
Yeah, so Garrett Foster, just small towns in Idaho. I do feel fortunate. I got some good opportunities along the way that kind of helped me grow a little bit, but got started here, like I said, or like you said, actually, my cousin, my dad had a construction business here locally. And so after I got done with high school, I went to work for them. And then I got done with college and I went to work for them, to start a career, and was a part of growing that business and seeing it succeed and grow. And then, like you said, they sold that business. And so then I was in a transition period and trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And I just had that entrepreneurial itch. So I just went about, finding my own businesses and figuring out along the way how to scale and grow them. And I recently exited one of those businesses, and I've got into a couple more very, very recently. But in the meantime, I decided to start, coaching and consulting and helping other people grow their businesses.
Yeah, I love that overview, Garrett. Clearly, you just love the fundamentals of business, and you really touched on the one word that I'm so excited to get into with you here today, and that is scale. I feel like we throw that word around a lot in the world of business, and especially in entrepreneurship. What does scale mean to you? And before I actually throw that back to you, I want to read from your website because I love the way that you express this. A lot of listeners will relate, where the first headline on your website says, "Trapped in a business that controls you? You deserve to break the chains of feeling the pressure of everything depending on you." So Garrett, we're talking about a lot of things here today. We're talking about increased revenue. We're talking about decreased stress. How do we start balancing all this, and how does scale fit into that, scaling the right way?
Yeah, thanks. So, it kind of all started when we were growing this construction business. And then one of the first ones, my dad kind of ventured out. And this was back in the day when Harleys were, I'm not saying Harleys aren't still cool, but this is back in the day when Harleys and the custom cycles were the big trend. And he ventured out and started that business. And I kind of helped him a little bit there. And we both reached burnout within about 3 years and ended up shutting that business down. And then later on, my wife came to me and said, "Hey, I think I want to buy this bakery." It was a local bakery, Mrs. Powell's, that had these famous cinnamon rolls. And that business had been kind of struggling. She said, "I think I want to do this." So we did. And then she started to get burned out. And I thought, I can burn myself out. I can't burn my wife out. And so I had been trained in business at BYU, Idaho. I went to Gonzaga and got my master's degree. And I had worked for the company that my dad and cousin sold to, and I was an internal consultant building operating systems. And I started to put all the pieces together for small business and realized that even ourselves, we were hitting a ceiling as we were going along, and there had to be a system and a process to be able to put into place to break through those ceilings. And I think what happens, Brian, is most people create what I'm going to call a lifestyle business, or even they consider themselves self-employed. And if you've ever read like Robert Kiyosaki, he says that in the S quadrant, we think it stands for self-employed. He's like, I actually think it stands for psycholand. So what happens is everything just depends on us and only us, and it's stressful and it wears us out. It burns us out. And then most business owners end up quitting because it's overwhelming. Every time they try to grow, they hit a ceiling and it gets overwhelming. And so, that's what I went to work to try to make sure I didn't burn my wife out and burn us out again. We created a business system, an operating system for small businesses so that they could find those ceilings and break through them and continue to grow their business with system and process in place so that every time you grow, it doesn't have to stress you out because the system and the process take over.
Yeah, Garrett, I'll tell you what, hearing you talk about systems, we're going to get there in just a minute. But before we do, I remember being a young entrepreneur listening to podcasts like this, thinking that revenue is always the answer. More revenue will get me out of any hole. And hearing you talk about burnout, it's something I've personally experienced when I was running my agency, my marketing and SEO agency back in Boston in 2012, 2013. I was making good money. I was 22, 23 years old at the time, and it was more money than I had ever seen. But burnout was a real thing. And so I think a lot of listeners tuning in are always looking, how can I make my business more revenue? Is there a point, Garrett, where the focus has to be, if you're at $0, yeah, go chase revenue? Is there a point where we just chase revenue versus saying, hey, revenue's not the answer here? Or is it about getting it right out of the gates? I'd love to hear how you massage that, because it really is that tricky balance between revenue and scale and systems and processes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate that. And the answer is it depends. That's what's so exciting about working with people in their individual businesses is we come up with a customized game plan for exactly what they need. But the answer in being that it depends is sometimes the answer is revenue. Sometimes the answer is controlling costs. Sometimes the answer is slowing down so we can speed up. Sometimes we have a good business with some good margins. Our overhead might be high and there's opportunities there. Sometimes it's like you talked about, it's marketing and sales. So there's all the different components of a business that it takes to be successful. And the answer is every business is a little bit different and it depends. But I would say the danger lies in what you just mentioned, Brian, and that is that most people associate the cure to all their ills as growing revenue. Like that's the only tool they have in their tool belt. And the reality is there's so much more to that. I mean, we can take a current product set and we can build off that product set and create new products, or we can take our customers and we can turn them into reoccurring customers in other ways and grow revenue without having to acquire customers. And so there's a lot of different ways that we can seek that growth, because for me, I mean, I've been in moments in my career where I've had a business and I thought growth was the only answer. And that was top line sales. And right now for me, like in our businesses right now that we're focusing on, we talk about healthy growth. We want growth, but we want the growth to be healthy. And sometimes it's top end, but sometimes it's we just take and we say, hey, we're good in our revenues and sales right here, but we've got to figure out how to increase our margins and our net profit. And so what are we going to do in the middle of the business operationally to be able to improve that?
Yeah, I really appreciate all those considerations, because we're talking about a lot of different variables all at once that us as entrepreneurs and business owners, we're juggling all of these things. But fortunately, as someone who loves frameworks and I love systems and processes that I can lean on in times of struggle, but also in times of good things, I love the fact that systems, it's a word you've already said multiple times in our conversation here today. A lot of entrepreneurs, and yes, all of you entrepreneurs out there tuning into today's episode, will be thinking, Garrett, I've heard of systems before. I understand there's automations. I understand there's tools and softwares, but what are systems really? When you talk about systems, Garrett, what aspects of the business do you look at to systematize, and what are some examples of those systems to have in place in our businesses?
Oh, that's a good question. There are so many of them. I mean, the honest truth is anybody that has anything has probably stolen it from one place or another. And so like most, I've stolen it from a lot of really good books along the way and then crafted and customized it. But the system part is the entire part of our business. I mean, our business is made up of frameworks that include leadership, that include our product, that includes sales, marketing, our operational excellence with our overhead, and then our financial system and cash flow. And those are all components to it. And the system is the process in which we do business. And I would say, like, here's just an example. I think most people get into business because they have a good idea or they have a passion, right? And so they're a good technician. Well, we get that from the E-Myth, obviously, with Michael Gerber. Well, eventually they have to transform past that so that they can work on their business and not just in their business. But the problem is most people don't know how that works or how to do that. And so the systems that we have include intentional ways that we set our business up. So for example, this is just a simple big pitfall that most fall into, is we get started. I have a great idea. I have a good product. People like it. They start to buy it. Sales start to grow. All of a sudden, I find myself, as I grow the business, doing all the paperwork, doing payroll, doing the accounting side of the business. And that's not what I love. I love the product. I love the service that I provide. And that's what I'm good at, or I love to deal with customers. But all of a sudden I find myself doing the other things. And so having a framework and a process that says, this is how that's going to take care of itself without me. And having an understanding, when is the right time to delegate? How do we delegate properly? Because delegation, there's an art to delegation. And so then how do we grow our team systematically? What will be the first person we bring onto the team? What responsibilities will we give them? And then we have to, which we're not always good at, but we have to align that with the things that we enjoy doing, we're good at, and bring the most value to the business. Usually, as an entrepreneur, the most value we can bring to the business is the interfacing with the customers and really making sure our product is solid. But we get bogged down with all of the things that I mentioned, like the accounting part of things. And that's where stress rises, burnout happens.
Yeah, really well said. Gosh, so many things that we all experience, those real life examples of us getting bogged down by those tedious tasks. But Garrett, you led us there, so I'm just going to ask the question for you to answer it clearly, which is, when do we start delegating? How do we start delegating? It's probably, I'll openly admit here on the air, is that's probably the one thing I got most wrong in all of my businesses. Probably took me 10 years of my entrepreneurial career to understand the art of delegation, onboarding team members, so that I could then grow in even better and more meaningful and fulfilling ways. Talk to us about how we begin that process of delegating, because it's so hard. Our businesses are our babies, Garrett.
They are. And I think we all fall into the trap thinking, if I don't do it, it won't get done right. So there's a couple of frameworks, and actually frameworks could be the right word. Maybe mindset is the better word. There's a couple mindsets. Here they are. First of all, we have to understand that if somebody else can do the job to 80% of what we can do, we have to be able to let go of that. Now, there may be, I always help people and teach them and coach them to say, there may be some non-negotiables. So what are the non-negotiables in your business that you will not or cannot give up? I think you have to be intentional about not just being too emotionally tied to things, but there may be some things that are too difficult in your business to give up. I talked to a lady one time in her business, and I said, we need to get these things away from you. And the one thing was the billings and the receivables and the payables and those things. And she said, well, nobody else can do the billing. Only I know it that well. And I would challenge you, you have to get rid of that thought process. You can let go of some of those things. But if there's something, so you start with non-negotiables. If there's something absolutely you can't give up, then you put that over there in the corner. You don't worry about it. And then I think you just chart out, like I always make a list and say what, and then I rank it from 1 to 10. How much value does this activity provide to the business if I do it? And how good am I at it? And how much do I enjoy doing it? And once you start to get those things there, then you start to pick through the ones that somebody else can provide the value, you don't enjoy doing, or maybe you're not that good at. And if you do those, then it tells you where you should start delegation. And then you just have to be very intentional about how you delegate. A lot of people think delegation is that you just tell somebody, hey, Sam, now I need you to do this. And it's way more than that if we want to succeed. We have to be intentional. Part of the process is documenting what we do. We can do that in multiple different ways. We can have it on paper. We can have it on video. There's actually some really good ways to do that, on videos and online now to have it. But we have to have some sort of resource that says this is how I expect to have it done. But then after that, you just have to have trust and let go a little bit.
Yeah, really well said. Easy advice, not so easy to follow. And I think that's the important stuff. But shout out, one thing that we use behind the scenes here at the Wantrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast is I'm a big fan of Loom. If I need someone to do something, I record on Loom. Loom has an AI feature now where it writes out the SOP based on what I say in the video. So really cool tools out there, Garrett, to your point that we can create those SOPs and start pawning it off. And I think one of the biggest takeaways, something I'm going to leave today's episode with, Garrett, is the 80% rule. If someone can do it at least 80% as well as I can or as it needs to be done, that's more than good enough to outsource it. So I love the fact that you talk about delegation in that way. I want to come back to this concept of ceilings because it's something that shows up so much in the way that you work and the way that you help other people. And I've experienced that there's multiple ceilings that we all face in our road to business growth. I think about the first ceiling is go get your first customer or client. That's the thing that takes you from entrepreneur to entrepreneur. But then from there, it's a question of how can I repeat this process to keep getting more, maybe to hit 5K a month, 10K a month. There's different questions that need to be asked at all of these different inflection points. So talk to us about some of those ceilings because you've seen it on really micro levels as well as really huge levels. So how does it change as we move up that and blast through some of these ceilings we face?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So if we think about the life cycle of anything, we have growth that happens and then we have maturity. And then eventually we have decline, and that comes into most programs or organizations in general. And I think what we have to do is start to feel those different phases of the business because we can feel the growth, but then we have to feel that ceiling. So having good, clear set goals will help us identify those ceilings. When something starts to plateau, we might be an indication that we're hitting a ceiling. When we start to get that frustration that pops up over and over, especially as we grow a team and we get their feedback, that could be another ceiling that we're about to hit. But what we have to be good at is identifying those ceilings and plateaus and then pushing to another level of growth as we hit that. And then we have to be very nimble. So it ends up costing us a lot in business if we over prepare for that next phase of growth. What happens is we end up with a high overhead and we cut our margins and our profits, and it's a dangerous place to be, especially in a crazy world we live in. That we live in now, like we don't know when the next COVID could happen. And so if we overinflate our business and get too heavy in preparation for growth, and then all of a sudden something like COVID happens, then we are a sitting duck, like we're in trouble. So we have to be very strategic about that. And so as we get better in our business, understanding those ceilings and then preparing for them, we have to be very nimble and very quick to react. Being clear in what our mission and vision is, being clear in our goal, like have we set our teams down? And Brian, by the way, this may be a team of one. Like, I know when I start a business all by myself, guess what? I still create core values for the company. I still create a mission and vision. I still create 1, 3, and 5 year goals. I still create monthly scorecards that I can look at and judge the business. And you would say, why do you do that when you're just a number of one? And the reason is because my 1, 3, and 5 year goals include growing to a place where I won't be a number of one. And when I start to bring people onto that team, I have to be able to effectively communicate what those things are that we plan to accomplish. And when we know that and we start to hit those goals, then we can start to just follow what we've outlaid. And that's when the delegation comes, like you talked about, or the structural things come. We may have to add a position here or this. And when you actually map it out and have some intentionality behind it, rather than just going with the flow like most entrepreneurs do, then we can actually organize that in a frame of thought and actually execute on it as we go. Now we save stress for everybody, as well as we set ourselves up for success instead of just kind of luck, if you will.
Garrett, those are some really powerful points that you just made there, because you said the word intentionality. I think that answer there reveals how intentional every step of your growth is. It is such an important point that you called out the team of one, because quite frankly, we all started there. Of course, some people may start with a business partner along the way, but Garrett, making these plans, having this level of intentionality from the stage of us being solopreneurs is incredibly important, because what I'm hearing in that last answer is you take your executive time very seriously. You are not just, you pointed out, working on the business versus in the business. It sounds to me like you really have the ability and carve out the time intentionally to take a giant step back and ask yourself these big questions. Talk to us about that executive time. Is this something you do weekly, monthly, quarterly, annually? I'd love to get into your head of the types of questions that you ask in those sessions with yourself, because we're all executives, and I don't think most solopreneurs view themselves as such. So talk to us about that executive strategic time.
Yeah, I mean, that comes back. So to give credit where credit's due, it comes from a lot of places, but Covey is kind of the one who, started that thought process with the rocks, and that we got to put the big rocks in the bucket first if we want to allocate our time to the things that are both important and urgent. And if we, first of all, I had to get behind that thought process that Covey shared, and he talks about it as a paradigm shift. And I had to really get into my head to say, oh, there's some truth behind that. Urgent is going to beat out important every time. And once I understand that, now I can be intentional and understand what's happening. We all get this hit of dopamine when we go and we solve a problem, when we put the fire out. And so we have to fight against those natural instincts to get stuck in that. But to answer your question directly, like it's either daily or weekly. It also is monthly. And then when you have a business going, it has to be weekly, monthly, and quarterly, but specifically quarterly. We have to put ourselves in these places where we focus on important and not just urgent. Otherwise, urgent will win out the day every single time, and we never get to the important. And then we wonder why we're caught, just like they talk about in the whirlwind. Why are we caught there and we can't get out? It consumes us. It's because we've actually chosen to be there. I think we have to understand that first. We've made a choice to be there, so we have to be intentional about making the choice to get out. So for me, it's daily. Like every day I have to think intentionally about the things that are important and not just urgent. For a business and like a leadership team, for example, I think it has to be weekly. But really in a business, and once business grows and scales to a certain extent, I think we really have to put a tremendous amount of focus on the quarterly. Quarterly, we get together, we set goals for the next 90 days. We do that every quarter. And that is like 2 days that we set aside for an offsite or something, where we are very intentional about thinking about the important things and not just the urgent, and disconnecting from everything else.
Yeah, that's really special. I think there's something magical about a 90-day time frame. I'm a big believer in quarters. I think that 90 days gives you so much time and ability to make significant changes to your business. We can get most projects done within 30, 60, 90 days. And I think having that deadline, a lot of people will let, for example, I'm going to call out a lot of beginner entrepreneurs here. They let creating their website drag out for 6 months to a full year, and that's what holds them back. But 90 days, even bringing it back to 30 days, just operating inside these sprints gives you the ability to say, hey, here's what's urgent, here's what's important, let's just bang these things out. So Garrett, I love those real life insights. I want to ask you, because so much of your business focuses on healthy growth. That's the term that I'm going to piggyback on here. Talk to us about healthy growth, because obviously we can geek out about business strategy and all of these important concepts here on the air together. But what stands out to me about your business and the way that you operate is you want businesses to lead us to also living good lives. I know how important your family is to you, the life that you personally live. I know how important these are. How do you balance these things? Where does all that fit in aside from the business strategy?
Yeah, great question. So the funny thing is I think balance in today's life is overused. When we hear people talk about work-life balance, I think that's used when we're in a scenario where we don't like what we do. So I think that's the first thing you have to do is say, do I like what I do? When we find ourselves in a place where we like what we do, and we can be there when we set up a business so that it doesn't own us, but we actually own the business, then this work-life balance thing starts to kind of go away, because we're not torn to choose, right? Like, I don't think we should have to choose between the two. I think if we set it up right, they just mesh together, which is the most healthy way to be. So if we're talking about health, like even individually, I think that's the way to go. My wife teases me all the time because she's like, you're never going to retire. And I think about that and I tell her all the time, you're right. Why would I retire? Why would I retire? The reason that people retire is because they're trying to get away from something they don't like, which is the job. If we set our businesses up right, why would we retire? And so setting them up is in a place where I think the most important thing we can do, Brian, and I'll give another credit to a book. So Patrick Lencioni just has a new book, and I love all his books, but the new one is called The Six Working Work Type Geniuses. Six Working Geniuses? I'd have to look. Anyways, he talks about how we organize our work and how we understand ourselves. So we're doing what gives us energy every day. I think when we structure our business right and we put ourselves in places where it gives us energy to do what we do, and we delegate and put the other things to other people so that it doesn't bog us down and drain our energy, all of a sudden health happens. When we talk about business, health is sales, margins, profits. We have to understand every part of that. And I think as we grow through our entrepreneurial journey, we have to be intentional about where we put financial frameworks in, because those financial frameworks at some point are going to be the frameworks that set us up for that health, and to understand and organize where those healthy metrics come from. And if we don't, then we're just living by feel, and we're actually living by emotion. I talk to, clients all the time that get emotionally tied to a product and then they can't let go of it. And it's really not even a profitable product. And that's okay. And I tell them that's okay. Like, if that product is that important to you, keep it. But I want you to understand you're making or not making money there, and where are you making your money, so that now you can take and be intentional about how we actually healthily grow the business.
Yeah, Garrett, I'm going to steal that from you. When people talk to me about retirement, why would I retire from something that I absolutely love doing? Genuinely, when people ask me about my hobbies and how I spend my time, I love working. This gives me so much joy and fulfillment and truly energy in life. So yeah, good point there. I think that it's really important for all of us as entrepreneurs, but it leads me to this. Garrett, I've probably asked less than 5 people this question in my entire life. And that is, when I hear you talk about these things, you talk about the level of intentionality. It's clear that you know not only where you are, but you are very clear on where it is that you want to go. There's a gap there. There's always a gap for all of us and where we are and where we want to be. You have a very powerful ability to stick to your processes and systems and stick to your own desires, to maybe sacrifice some of the things that we want in the short term to achieve what you want in that long term. Where's that? I don't know if we're going to call it discipline or accountability. It's probably a mix of all of these things, but give us some insights into the way that Garrett's mind works, because this is where most people fall off track. Is they can make these aspirational goals of, this is where I want to be a year, 5 years, 10 years from now. But how do you actually stick to that and make it happen?
Yeah, that's a great question. When you ask that question, it reminds me of like our New Year's resolutions, right, that we set. And then what is the percentage of New Year's resolutions that actually happen? Not very many of them, but we talk about them for the entire year, right? So what happens is we haven't put those into an approach that keeps us in front of us. Like we talk about, so like always when we're talking operationally about a business, we'll always look at a meeting cadence. And even if it's just me and making a personal goal of my own, in the meeting cadence, we have to figure out what cadence that is and what works to be able to help us be accountable. Do you know, Brian, what I think one of the most dangerous things is for entrepreneurs? Because now in this coaching phase, and we're growing a couple businesses too, but in this coaching phase, I'm working with a lot of entrepreneurs. Do you know what I realize is that entrepreneurs actually are very disciplined in some things, and then we by nature are very disciplined in other things. For example, when we're the boss and we don't answer to anybody for so long, we get used to not answering to anybody. And so now how intentional are we about our time? Because we've been able to actually sustain a business where we're not accountable to anybody. And so all of a sudden, like when I come in and I help to try to hold a business owner accountable, there's this resistance to it, right? So we have to learn how to hold ourselves accountable. We have to have everything in front of us. I'm a believer in affirmations. If we have time, I'll tell you one quick story. We're growing a current business, an excavation business right now. and we're hitting one of those ceilings. My partner was, feeling the stress of having to keep up with our growth because we had goals to double the size of the business. And we're intentional about that. And so we're getting to a point where we can feel one of those ceilings that we're hitting. So we targeted the next person that we'd bring onto the team. We get that person to come on and get started. And, now there's an extra expense that goes along with that. So we got our estimator together and we said, hey, we're going to make this move, but to understand, we're going to considerably add to our cost section. We have got to grow revenue to do this. And just joking, I said, hey, we need to get $2 million in the next 2 weeks of work. And he was like, whoa. And I didn't act like I was kidding to him, like, we're serious about this. And so he gets serious about it too. And anyways, long story short, he's like, wow, how are we going to do this? And by that Wednesday, he had picked up a job for $600,000 or $400,000. And by that Friday, another $600,000. He's over $1 million now, only a week into it. And he's sending me these text messages. And I sent him a text message back. I said, we just got to speak it into the universe and it will happen. Well, it's obviously not that simple, but part of the foundation is like, are we talking to ourselves? Are we understanding the power of the subconscious mind? And when we talk to ourselves, that those things then become, they eventually start to come to pass. One of the first book a lot of us all read is Think and Grow Rich. And that talks about the power of the subconscious mind. And it's real, it's true. So we speak it into the universe, and then we put plans in place, and then we do everything we can to execute. And then the universe starts to open up for us. Because once again, we've talked about energy, but the world that we live in is all made out of energy, good or bad. So when we tap into the good energies, and then things start to happen for us.
Yeah, Garrett, gosh, I really appreciate this because as much as you and I are here talking about strategy on the air, this is the real stuff. And I remember being a 19-year-old entrepreneur sitting in business school, and in business school, we don't talk about these things, Garrett, but here on these conversations, I think it's so clear that when you start to accept this stuff, it is real. You said that this entire world is made up of all this energy. We can harness it for good or we can harness it for bad. We can harness it for focus and growth, or we can harness it for just distractions and social media and TV and all these other crazy things. And it's up to us. And I think that consciously, intentionally choosing the way that we want to use it is incredibly important. So huge thanks to you for bringing this here on the air. I want to ask you about this as we come towards the end of today's episode, because you talk about coaching and obviously your business, Prevail Legacy Builders. I love the fact that that is the way that you articulate, even in the name of your company. It's so important for us to realize that's what we're building towards. My word for 2024 is building, because we're all building things that are active projects, that are things that are hopefully going to long outlive the impact that we get to have personally. So talk to us about coaching, because it seems to me from the outside looking in at your business that you really view that role as a guiding role, as a mentorship role, as someone who not only has been there before, but someone who can help people along that path. It's obviously a different career change for you. So talk to us about the role of coaching and mentoring, and how much fun that is for you to operate in so many different business models, business types, business sizes. I'd love to hear your insights there.
Yeah, it is. I do. I love it. I love to help people. Like, when you grow your own businesses for so long, you start to realize that it's, at the end of the day, it's not about the profits. It's not, well, it is. It's always about the profits. It's always about the sustainability of the business. But we start to really understand that the sustainability of the business depends upon the people. And you start to take it with pride. Like when you're growing a business and everything's going well or everything's not going well, and then one of the teammates steps into your office and they don't talk to you about the problem that's happening at work. They talk to you about what's going on at home. And they just have that trust and respect, and it's mutual, that they want to talk about those things. And you can help people on your team become better fathers and better mothers and better spouses, and better community members and better churchgoers and better whatever they are, right? Like, that's what makes the difference. That's what makes it all worth it. That's why we save ourselves from burnout, when we understand really what building a business and a community and a unit is about. So then that transfers to helping other people grow their businesses too. Like, there is tremendous satisfaction in working with the business owners. And I heard a good leader the other day say, I can see around corners that other people can't see around. And when I think about that, there's nothing magical about that in the business world. It just means I've been around that corner before. And when we get up to that corner and we don't know what's around it, it's scary, it's intimidating. We start to hesitate, like you talked about making a website. We're like, is the website going to be perfect? I don't know what I'm doing. What should I do? And so we sit at that corner and we hesitate. But when I've been around the corner, and I've been around almost every corner in the last 27 years, it's nice to put your arm around somebody and say, hey, let's go around that corner because I know what's there and it's not that scary. And then to see their business grow and to see them do things that they didn't think they could do before, it's not because I'm special or it's not because anything's magical. It's just because there's a confidence because I've been there before. And I love transferring that confidence into somebody else saying, hey, let's take you there too. Now you've been there. Now you know what it's like. Now you can have the confidence in doing the same thing. And then you build that self-confidence within themselves. And then it can just roll. And then it can take their businesses to some amazing places.
Yeah, gosh, really well said. As a visual learner, I love that visual of seeing around corners and you putting your arm around them saying, I know it's around there. It's okay. It's safe. Let's go there together. It's something that I think we can all relate to in every facet of life. So why would it be any different in business? So I love those insights, Garrett. This last question, I always love asking it to guests because it is totally open-ended. You can take in any direction that you want. And that is considering all the great things that we talked about here today. So many strategic nuggets of knowledge, as well as the real stuff that happens mentally as we step into the role of being a business owner, an executive, a leader, all words that we've used so many times in today's conversation, as well as your decades of experience as an entrepreneur. What's your one piece of advice for listeners tuning in at all different stages of business growth? What's that one thing that you hope they walk away from today's episode with?
Hopefully a little bit of stickability and sustainability. And then I think you talked about mentors. Go find a mentor, go find somebody. Mentors can come from books. They can come from podcasts like this. They can come from hiring a coach or consultant or whatever it might be, or getting part of a mastermind group, those kinds of things. Like the mentorship's critically important. But I think, Brian, one thing that we have this responsibility to take upon us is small business is the backbone of America. And it's under attack. It's not easy to be a small business owner anymore. And I think us as a community of entrepreneurs, we have to wear that with a badge of honor and say, I'm going to stick with it. I am going to help. Like going from a person who was part of a small business that eventually sold to a big business, it's just not the same. Like being part of small business in the community, I've been able to help local high schools put new stadiums in for their football team. I've been able to donate back. I've been able to be a part of it. I've been at the events. I've been able to watch my kids grow up in those programs, and that's small business. That's the backbone of America. We supply jobs to the local community, and not only that, it's not a big corporate feel as much as it is like a home family business. That is so much more satisfying and enjoyable for even employment for the locals, and they can get behind that mission and vision. So I think that's what we need to do. Find a mentor, find a way, invest in yourself, and then beyond that, just stick with it. You understand what the cause is of what you're doing as an entrepreneur. Get excited about that. It's not easy, but it is so worth it because being the backbone of America, that's what we need right now. We need that strength.
Yes, amen to all of those things, Garrett. Gosh, that is such powerful advice to really cap off an incredible conversation with you here today. It's also, I think it's right in line with all the things that you do because you don't just say these things. You are a shining example of all of these things in action. I'm so appreciative that you take all of your own experiences, your own knowledge to really help and guide others along the way. So right on cue, drop those links on us. Where should listeners go if they want to go deeper into the wonderful world of all the ways that you're helping so many other business owners around the country?
Yeah, prevaillegacy.com is the website, and they can find me there and easily schedule. And I love to help people. Obviously, there's a monetary thing behind it, usually just to make sure somebody's serious about it and gonna actually take it only for their well-being to benefit their company and be serious about it. But you can use that website and schedule a call or a consultation or just where we can connect. And I'd love to connect with anybody and just see, what can be done to help. Because once again, I'm passionate about understanding that small business needs to thrive for America to be as healthy as it can be.
Yes, listeners, you already know the drill. We are making it as easy as possible for you to find the direct link to Garrett's business website. It's at prevaillegacy.com. No matter where it is that you're tuning into today's episode, if you scroll right on down, you can click straight through to his website. And Garrett, to your point, those who pay attention. It's one way to hold ourselves accountable in any endeavor that we're serious about. So listeners, definitely go check out Garrett's website. You're going to find so much awesome stuff there. It's something that guided my research for today's episode with Garrett. You'll see his attitude towards business, his attitude towards helping others. It's fully on display in all the things that he puts out into the world. So definitely go check that link out. Otherwise, Garrett, on behalf of myself and all the listeners worldwide, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks, Brian.